All right, welcome into the 305 guys here on the Five Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me, Ethan J. Skolnick, at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Donno. You can follow him at Alex Donno. We're going to talk a little Jimmy Butler, but we're going to broaden it a little bit today. So we'll have some fun with this topic since it doesn't seem like anybody on Twitter is having fun with it anymore. We are sponsored here by Prize Picks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down $5. You get $50 to play. Also, we're going to be running a contest, but you have to be subbed with the code 5. Okay. So if you're not sub with the code 5, get a new email address, sub with the code 5. Here's why, because we're going to be running a contest on Sunday, and the winner of that contest will be posting this on the 5 Reasons Sports Twitter account. Winner of that contest will get $59 in free promo funds in addition to the promo funds that they give you. So $59 in honor of Super Bowl 59. So make sure you check it out. Subscribe right now to Prize Picks. Use the code 5. You play, you get $50. You can play across the sports spectrum. You can play up to 6 players together. But make sure that you're there prior to the contest on Sunday. So more announcements on that to come. All right, Alex, let's get to a brief update on this. Greg and I will have more tonight.
Yeah, please give me the update because I want to know. We're 6 days away from the trade deadline, and we got we got other side dishes now with the Terry Rozier investigation, and and I still want to know what's going to happen with Jimmy. So what's the latest?
I don't think you can say Terry Rozier right after we did a Prize Pick spot. Let's be careful of that, Donno. We got to be very careful about things that we say because the NBA very against gambling and daily fantasy unless they're sponsors of theirs, in which case they're not. So here's what the latest is. The Miami Heat have not lessened their desires in the trade market. They are motivated to trade Jimmy Butler, but they are not. This report that came out that they've come down a little bit in what they're willing to take. I do not believe that to be the case.
I didn't believe
they are looking for what they were looking for before, which is basically that they have no desire in taking guaranteed money beyond the year 2026 unless it's a player that they would be willing. If it was on the open market, they would be willing to sign that player beyond 2026. So it has to be a player that piques their interest. Otherwise, they're just looking for flexibility. And if they can't find flexibility and a player who can help them in the trade market, they are prepared to just take this into the offseason and get their flexibility then, which would essentially mean a little bit under the cap, but then also a trade exception. And they'll kind of dare Jimmy to opt in. Like, that's where this is headed if they can't make a trade in the next 6 days. And for those asking, well, why not just make a trade? Just trade him. Well, here, let me start with this. They don't want Bradley Beal. Okay. I don't know how many other ways I can say this. It's every day that ends in Y. They are not interested in Bradley Beal. Even if they were to be offered the 3 kind of not so great first round picks that Phoenix picked up for Utah, they still wouldn't be interested in Bradley Beal. And I don't believe that all 3 of those have been offered. So it's just not, it's a non-starter for them. Barry and I have used the same language on this because I don't know what fans want us to tell them. Like, I can't make them like Bradley Beal. They don't want Bradley Beal. I mean, they might be a fine human being when they had interest in him as a player before, but at that contract with the no trade clause, they do not want Bradley Beal. So if it's going to be Phoenix, then it has to be other teams involved. And my understanding, it has to be like 4 or 5 teams involved. And the problems that they're having with that kind of trade is that in the old CBA, they'd have a deal done already. Okay. In the new CBA, because in the old CBA, you could basically take contracts 25% greater if you were over the cap. Okay. It was just a question of paying some tax. So you could find teams to do that. But now any team that's over the first apron, they don't have that 25% cushion. And so they can't. So it's essentially, it has to be dollar for dollar. And then teams in the second apron, not only can they not do that, but they also can't aggregate players. So that means that you can't trade 2 players to make something happen or 3 players. You have to involve other teams. So they're running into this roadblock where, yes, they're talking to teams, but the other teams that might get involved in this, they have to be incentivized. And the only way to incentivize them is to sweeten it with picks. The Heat don't have those picks. Phoenix's picks don't appear to be that attractive. And one of the other issues, Alex, is that over the next 5 years, there are basically 3 or 4 teams that own the draft. Like, they have all the picks.
That's right.
New Orleans, Utah traded some of them, but still them. New Orleans, which is one of the reasons we're hearing up at New Orleans now. and Brooklyn. Like, they have all the picks, and so you're trying to find other teams to incentivize these deals. It's not easy. So this is, I know the Heat fans are just they're killing the messenger at this point because they just want Jimmy traded. Trust me, they want Jimmy traded. The Heat want this done. Okay, what I heard about that shoot around, they want this. I got more detail on that. They want this done, but Alex, as of this moment, they don't have a deal that they like. And when I say they like, something that is palatable to them. It doesn't have to be great, but nothing on the table that interests them.
Well, and it's got to, like, they can only settle to a certain degree. And a lot of the fans who are just like, get him off my roster, make the deal done. A lot of those same people would criticize Pat Riley for cutting a terrible deal, right? They may not admit it now, but that's exactly what would happen. If you cut a shitty deal, people are going to go, Pat's asleep again. What is he doing? So, I mean, listen, if the organization caves in and takes a bad deal for Jimmy, and I understand it's toxic, you want him off the team and all that, but if you cave too much, Ethan, then you're sending a message that, hey, like, we can be doormats, that if you really want to get out of here, that, you know, players can force their way out. And obviously at some point, Jimmy will be successful in forcing his way out, even if it doesn't happen before the trade deadline. But you've got to do it to some degree on your terms, that you can't just settle for the worst possible deal. Now, a lot of people, or at least a few people, are asking about this in the chat, and I was curious about this as well with Ingram, because I started to see this stuff come up today. What's going on there?
Well, I've talked about Brandon Ingram, and I think Brandon Ingram would make some sense for them. Again, this is personal opinion, not reporting, because he's on the same timeline. He's 27 years old. If you look at the way that this roster is constructed, I could see Brandon Ingram sliding in at the 3 and providing some of the offense that this group would need. It also would keep you as a big team if he's going to play the 3 and he's going to play with Ware and with Bam. So to me, I would have interest in that. I know he has an injury history. I get it. I do think they could unlock a little bit more with him. I think that he'd probably put on a little weight with them, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think if they get him in the right kind of conditioning program. And again, I think 27, right? So he was looking for $50 million per year. I don't think he's getting that in the open market. They've held the line on him. I don't see a lot of other teams that are interested in that. Now, I know that Toronto has had some interest in him. They could get involved in this kind of trade. But I think it's interesting with New Orleans. Gambo came out right away and said the Pelicans are not interested in Jimmy. I believe that. Okay. I don't think that Griff would want Jimmy right now. That's not the direction that they're going. Obviously, I don't think he would want to be there, and I don't think they would pay him. So I don't think that the whole thing with New Orleans is about I know that Stein reported, and Stein's a good reporter, that they approached the Heat about making a sort of a 1-to-1 deal there. I don't see they would need to add some salary to it anyway, New Orleans. But in terms of a direct deal with Miami, I don't see that. I can see the possibility of Ingram being involved in a bigger deal that where Jimmy's sent somewhere else, and that New Orleans has the cap room and the draft picks and the player assets that could facilitate something. And it's going to require a team like that to get involved. So I think it's somewhat promising that we're hearing about New Orleans. I will say I know Griff pretty well. I covered him in Cleveland. He's not going to be rushed on a deal either. And so and the Heat have some history of dealing with Griff, although there's also some history of some trades being knocked down. So I think it's an interesting possibility, but do I expect to see Brandon Ingram in Miami? No, but do I think he qualifies as the kind of player they might go beyond 26 for? Yes. I think that decision would just be made after the season when they kind of see how he fits, because he is on an expiring, but then he's going to want to get paid. And I think if you can get like a 3-year, $100 million deal done with him after the season, then that makes sense. Would he take that when he's been looking for 50 per? I don't know. But then again, then you get the flexibility at the end of the year that you would have gotten if you didn't keep Jimmy. So, and you don't have to deal with Jimmy's opt-in. So I feel like there's some definite options. But as a player, Alex, I think he does fit kind of the classification of what they would be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just be looking for him to hopefully stay healthy. But outside of those concerns, that's a player that would actually make me feel excited about what you could get in return on a possible Jimmy deal. So I would be all in on that. I'm a lot more in on that than I would be on Bradley Beal. I think I share the Heat front office's sentiment on that.
Well, and you hit it perfectly. And on the other side is we'll have some fun with this and just throw out our best scandals of all time in South Florida sports. But that, there is a certain element where Heat fans want this both ways, is they're trying to rush the Heat to do something, but they're not going to be happy about the return. And then all we're going to hear is, well, they should have traded them this summer. And I just keep coming back to this. Like, does anybody know of an offer that was made to them this summer? Because I don't. I don't. Like, I know that the agent has talked about teams contacting him. And by the way, he hasn't mentioned Phoenix as one of those teams. There were other teams at the time, but none of them made their desires clear to the Heat. And I do know the Heat explored the market for Jimmy this summer. They looked around, not that they were looking to move him, but they did, and they didn't see anything. So again, this is both sides have basically said the other is lying about everything, and maybe one side is lying and the other side is not. Maybe there was a market for Jimmy and the Heat are not telling the truth. My inclination, based on all the other information I've gotten that has or hasn't checked out, is that probably Jimmy's side is not telling the truth, but it could be either way. The point is, there was no deal for Jimmy Butler this summer that would have remedied all this. And also, the Heat fan would have freaked out, I think, the casual Heat fan, if they had traded Jimmy, at that point. I think it's easy to say, well, with foresight, yes, okay, you didn't want this situation, but I don't think most people would have been happy about it. All right, let's get to on the other side of this. We will get to some of the other scandals. I know we're seeing, Suns and Warriors, and Shams is saying this again. The thing about the Warriors is you have to have the players have to want it, and I just keep hearing. And I can tell you that I'm not the only one that's heard this, because it's been reported by KOC, although I don't agree with another KOC report, and also a couple of my media friends who deal with the Warriors regularly, that Steph does not want Jimmy. So I've thought Golden State is a possible destination for him too. But if Steph and Steve don't want Jimmy, and Steve talks to Spo, and I know Spo has not said Jimmy's name in 3 weeks, so I can't imagine those conversations have been real positive here. All right, let's get to the other part of this episode. Before we do, want to mention a great old new sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and is going to be a regular sponsor here of 305 Guys, All Pro Construction Builders. What is it now? It's February, basically February. Well, you got some time.
I mean, basically, almost.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's always hurricane season here, isn't it? All right, so All Pro Construction Builders, what do? They specialize in the impact windows and door installations for residential and commercial properties. All Pro Construction Builders, state certified, licensed, insured general contractors servicing Miami-Dade, Monroe, and Broward counties. They use top quality products, locally made, like all of our sponsors here that we deal with on the local side. They're family owned and operated. You only deal with one owner from start to finish. That's our guy, Danny. You can reach out to him at 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. They'll provide you with a free estimate and help you protect your home in less than 8 weeks. And here's the key. You got a 5% discount if you mention 5 Reasons, 305 Guys, 5 on the floor. Basically anything with the number 5. They'll know it came from us. Reach out to them at All Pro Construction Builders. Salas D is saying that I've been telling Mickey that Butler should stay. Why would I do that? Well, I mean, it's good for downloads, but honestly, sure, Alex, I'm sick of it. So I know that the coaching staff is sick of it. Like, they want this to be over with. I know there are some players that you're going to hear from after this is over who have been sick of this. People can kind of guess who some of those would be. I mean, they want this thing done. Okay. So this is not a case, and the Heat, in every conversation I have with anybody there, we're highly motivated to get something finished. Now, you're highly motivated, may not be they're highly motivated, but this is not a case where they want to hold him to the offseason, but they're also not scared of holding him to the offseason. And I know that was the report that came out from KOC that they don't agree with, because they're like, okay, we'll just take the flexibility. Like, worst case scenario, they'll keep dealing with the soap opera. But let's get to our soap operas of South Florida. Okay, so I'm going to just ask you. I'm going to go through some of them. I'm going to say, is this one worse? Without assigning blame. Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right, Chris Forster. For those who don't remember that was the Dolphins' offensive coach, who was actually brought back a second time, but he was doing lines of coke from his desk. Yes or no? Is this worse than that?
That wasn't worse, because they were, we moved on from that more quickly. You didn't have to find a trade partner for Chris Forster. You were able to, fire him pretty swiftly. So I'm going to say that's not worse.
Jonathan Martin and Richie Incognito.
That Ethan, that one, Bullygate, that might. I'm like, I don't think it was. I think it was bigger because it became such a media avalanche. I think the whole thing was probably overblown in a way that it should really never have been. And I read that entire Ted Wells report from start to finish, and I'm like, man, this is written like a preteen novel or so. It was very strange, the whole thing. But I don't know. I think that one might have been worse because Bullygate lingered for quite a while, and it was a black eye for the Dolphins for quite some time.
Now the Marlins have it was very embarrassing. The Marlins have hundreds of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some smaller ones that we forget about, like little ones. Like remember the first baseman they had? What was his? Mike Jacobs was his name, and the Marlins thought he was Jewish because his last name was Jewish, so they gave away his bobblehead on Jewish Heritage Night when he wasn't Jewish.
Yeah.
That was a good one. How about the Roy Halladay? Remember the Roy Halladay scandal? May he rest in peace. Where he threw like a no-hitter, a perfect game against the Marlins, and the Marlins tried to make money by selling his tickets afterwards. That was a.
I thought fair play. I mean, history happened in your stadium. Now that kind of reminded me though of Ethan when the Dolphins had Tim Tebow Day, when Tebow was here with the Denver Broncos, and then Tebow, who wasn't the starter at that time, got into the game and ended up leading a comeback victory. You know, when they were honored, it was Gator Day, I guess they were doing to honor Tim. And then Tebow was the visiting player. That was pretty bad.
Gator Day is one of the worst, actually. That was a Steve Ross.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a backstory of that one. So Steve Ross, okay, bless his heart. They told him it was a bad idea. Okay. And they told him it was a bad idea. He decided to go through with it anyway because he wanted to hype Tebow. They're like, why are you promoting an opposing player? And I guess I can tell the story now because he's not in his job right now. Harvey Green, who was a longtime senior vice president of communications, like the Tim Donovan of the Miami Dolphins, basically told Steve beforehand. He says, "Whatever you do," he says, "don't get photographed with Urban Meyer. Don't." Because Urban Meyer was there, but if you remember, I think Tony Sperano was the coach at the time, and there was all this pressure on Tony. Don't get photographed with Urban Meyer. Lead photo on the Sun Sentinel the next day. Steve Ross photographed with Urban Meyer. How about this one? Is this one worse? When Ross went after Jim Harbaugh and had Jeff Ireland on the plane.
Yeah.
When Sperano was still the head coach. Is that better or worse than this?
That was probably worse. I don't feel like that got as much coverage as this Jimmy thing did. It was like 10 years ago, so maybe I'm wrong, but I felt like that was probably worse because it was so avoidable. Like it was so just, how about if you want a new coach, fire your coach? Like, you know, Sperano was under contract when this whole thing was going on. And then to make matters even more awkward, after the failed poaching of Jim Harbaugh, then they had that news conference with Sperano looking so pissed the entire time where they announced his contract extension. It's like he didn't even look happy to be getting an extension. That was off, and that was so completely avoidable.
Well, and the other one was related to that. We could do Dolphins ones all day too. There was the time that they hired Marino, but didn't tell Marino what his job would be. And they demoted Rick Spielman under Marino, and Spielman was not aware of it at the time of the press conference. And Danny was with us, with the media, doing like a little press briefing, and he says, "Fuck it, guys, I got to go home to Claire." And like this came out of nowhere. Like he had no idea what his job was. Spielman didn't even have a suit in the office. That was another. Let me ask you this though, because this one came up here. Is this worse than the Nevin Shapiro scandal? I got to throw back you at the Canes.
No, and that was one of the things when we were brainstorming about doing this show. That was one of the first things that came into my mind. The Nevin Shapiro thing was pretty bad. I mean, and I'm not even, again, I thought a lot of what happened there, I thought was very overstated. And for those who kind of understand what Nevin Shapiro is like as a person, like you see, the guy is absolute scumbag, first my opinion, of course, but he does all these social media videos now where he exaggerates and lies about it. Like, it should not be surprising that the details of that report were so salacious, because this guy tells fish tales. Like, he tells a lot of fish tales, but it was awful. I mean, I'm a lifelong Miami guy, Ethan, and then Yahoo Sports publishes this report, and they're talking about it on the news, national news. Like, yeah, that was a lot like the way it was covered. It was a lot like Bullygate, Ethan. So I'm going to say that one was probably bigger.
All right, let me get to this because this is a fair question. Dominique Woods asked this question: why are we calling the Jimmy situation a scandal? I guess we can call it, is embarrassment too strong?
Yeah.
Is it more a distraction? Should we call it distraction? Would that be better? Like if we were to rate Heat distractions or Heat miscues, things that have not made the organization look great, even if in this case I will argue that they're not largely at fault. But I know some disagree with me about that. The Dwayne situation, I think, is the flashpoint, right? Because that was just it's your franchise player. Like you fumble your franchise player, whatever the other elements of that were, and people know that I had put Dwayne's side out there in a lot of different ways. But also, I found out some information later that there was shared blame there from the parties. I'm not saying from Dwayne. I'm saying maybe from those who were advising Dwayne along with the Heat, that there was a lot of stuff that came together there. I think the Dwayne thing is the thing that sticks out with the Heat. I think that if people were to say, okay, what have been the stuff that like the Heat who like to keep everything in house, right? Like they don't like this stuff getting out there. In recent years, what was it? The waiter's gummy situation, which to me was overblown. Yeah. I mean, he had a gummy. I mean, come on. I mean, right? Like that one comes up. Like, yeah. I mean, there's worse stuff that's gone on behind the scenes with the Heat. Man,
if you don't know how strong, if you don't know how strong those things are, that can absolutely happen.
This comes in for Big D. We don't know what Jimmy's going to say when he leaves. That's when the scandal might come in. He says the truth will come to light. Yes, I do know that the Heat have a long line of truth that they're ready to unload right back at him if that's the case. I mean, that's the part of this I'm kind of looking forward to. I want to see how Brian Goins has a good one. This was one that was kind of embarrassing to the Heat. The Juwan Howard free agency scandal. For those who don't remember, that's the one. That's actually the first conference call I've ever gotten on with the Heat when I was covering the team, the first year covering the team. And Pat Riley said he had to go to the proctologist to get the 10-foot pole removed from his ass, basically. He said that on a live conference call. I remember that. Because the league took Juwan away. Because this was pre-Andy Ellisberg. The Heat misordered the signing. So they didn't have the space to do something. They would have if they'd ordered it differently. But they didn't. The funny thing about it is that actually worked out for the Heat because they ended up signing Dan Marley instead, who was a better fit with the group that they had. I'll get to this one comment, then we'll just get back to the scandal talk. It doesn't seem like the Spurs are all that interested in Fox. I saw they used Castle as having the same potential Fox and rather keep him. It does seem like they're not willing to put Castle on the table at this point. But again, this could be posturing pretty early in it. Are we missing some Marlins related? I feel like the Marlins have had some. But there was Booz night. I mean, that's not a scandal. That's idiocy.
I mean, would you consider? Okay, there have been multiple fire sales, which obviously are done within the rules and parameters of baseball. But when you talk about pissing your fans off, I mean, I would argue that the whole construction of their stadium in itself was a scandal, Ethan, because I thought they lied to us about their intentions. They lied to the taxpayers. My beloved Orange Bowl getting torn down was, part of that whole. Although there were other issues there that would have maybe led to that happening anyway. But that whole thing. I mean, I would consider those. I mean, even though most of that was done within legal parameters, I would say, just the entire Marlins organization for the most part has been riddled with scandal.
I was gonna say, like, we could just say, you hit it on before I could. I was gonna say that the Marlins are the biggest scandal in South Florida sports history, right? Like, is that would be bigger in terms of overall, and yet, two World Series, including one since the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game. So that one plays into it also. I just think it's funny that the whole thing that happened with Tyreek Hill, which for the Dolphins, I mean, again, this is a huge scandal. You're talking about I mean, it's not scandal. I guess we're using the wrong word there, but it's sort of, I mean, this is the player was just voted the #1 player in the entire NFL by his peers, and he basically quit on his team before the end of the year. And we haven't even devoted that much attention to it because it's been all Jimmy all the time of late. And then that we get this from Lou F. that stadium. I do think it's the Marlins in general. There were so many others related to them in turn. I mean, if you were going to go with individual ones that they've had. But I think it's probably their fire sales. I think Nevin Shapiro. I think the Jimmy situation jumps out here because the Heat don't typically have these kind of things. Like the Shaq, yes, on the way out the door, kind of burned everything down. Dwayne, obviously. LeBron leaving is not a scandal in any way. LeBron was here for 4 years. He got what he wanted. They helped him get what he wanted. He left. He was always going to go home at some point anyway. The Jimmy thing, though, has aired the Heat's dirty laundry, and it's not even all out there yet on both sides, in a way that makes them incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that's whereas I think fans are like, well, they're stalling, they're dragging their feet. Trust me, like they don't like any of this, and their head coach is beside himself right now. And the sooner that can get done, the better. But I think we've come to it. I think it's the Marlins as a whole, Nevin Shapiro.
Yeah.
Right? Those would be the two. Oh, and then there was also the time that wasn't there a Dolphins player, Alfred Oglesby? Look that one up. Do you remember that? That's probably before your time.
I don't remember that one. Let me look it up.
I think he claimed to get kidnapped. I think you should look that one up. We'll let the viewers look that one up afterwards. So that's a good one. There was scandals with Daryl Gardner. There's all kinds of different scandals throughout the years. But this, again, I think scandal's probably the wrong word, but it's just I think sort of public embarrassment, being dragged through the mud, the organization making news for all the wrong reasons. I mean, this is somebody who helped carry you, a lot of people say carried you to the finals in 2 out of 5 years, into the conference finals in 3 out of 5 years. And for it to end like this, whenever it ends, I think upsets everyone. The Royd clinics, well, that was a good one too. Balco, right? That was. Does that count as a South? I guess that's a South Florida one, right? It was down here.
Well, there was the thing. What was the guy? I can't remember the guy's name now, but the guy who was working with A-Rod, and that became a huge story. And of course, that was in South Florida. I can't remember the gentleman's name now. I refer to him as the gentleman. How nice of me. Yeah,
it's a gentleman. Well, I'm gonna go with Nevin Shapiro as one. That was day after day after day after day. People were coming after Yahoo. In a big way. So anyway, if you have your own, send them to us. We'll talk about some of them next week as well. I'll continue to update on Jimmy as there are updates that are coming in. I just would be careful about the reports over the next few days, because a lot of this is teams trying to create leverage as they go forward. And the agent, well, not the agent, but the Jimmy's side seems to be trying to make the Heat look bad at every opportunity at this point. And I just don't know what the end game is, because it's not helping him get traded. At least that's their perspective on it. He didn't carry anything in one series. We can make that argument. All right, so we'll see. Look at that. So we've got the Jimmy people, the anti-Jimmy people. They're all checking in here. All right, we'll have a couple more podcasts that are going up here on the feed pretty soon on the YouTube channel. One that I did with Brady this morning about how the Heat can get out of their 500 rut. Follow all Alex's content, of course, on Locked On Canes. You get that, and also our guys' content on the Six Rings Canes show as well. Thanks for joining, everybody.